Great. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Filecoin Plus Notary Governance meeting. We're recording this one. There will be another one of these calls later on in a couple of hours. We'll record that as well. Both of these recordings will get uploaded and posted. Hopefully, we'll get some notaries that are able to attend one or the other. The goal there is to try and get more coverage. So we'll see how this goes. We are going to jump in. We've got some metrics to review. Then we're actually going to reorder this a little bit for this meeting. We have some client presentations that we'll do right after the metrics, and then we'll go into the process discussion for the large dataset notary process, and then open discussion there at the end. So from 2 weeks ago, we were seeing, again, those times to DataCap, times to respond, driving down. Currently, if you go to our dashboard, it's going to say that the average time to DataCap is about 17 or 18 minutes. This is, while aspirational, and we like to see those numbers, it is a little bit of an error. We're changing some of the calculations in where we are pulling these things. Currently, the GitHub scraper is running into an error and timing out. And so it is not correctly calculating some of this average time to DataCap. So while we love to see that 18-minute number, it may not be the most accurate right now. So stay tuned. We're hoping to get that updated by the end of the week. And we'll see some more metrics as well as some updates to things like notary names getting filled into the dashboard. So the allocation funnel, we looked at two of these breakout funnels at our last notary governance call. And like I mentioned then, it's becoming a little bit tricky to build some of these allocation funnels with the large data set notaries being factored in. So we're working on breaking out those statistics so that we can more easily present the DataCap allocation for direct client activity and for large data set activity. So this 26.3 petabytes includes some of those 5 petabyte large data set notaries. So that's where we're sitting. From 26.3, we dropped down to 6% being sent out to clients, and then we dropped down to that half of a petabyte getting sealed in deals. So that's where we want to kind of keep driving some of that impact. Direct notary activity, there was an issue that came up last week, which should have gotten already addressed. I've heard from a couple of notaries, they brought it up in the channels that they weren't seeing all of their direct requests. The problem with that, we've identified what had to do with pagination on GitHub. Once we hit a certain number of open issues, we weren't grabbing all of them. That's been adjusted. Everyone should see their open issues. This time we have about 59 open issues. That's good and bad. We're seeing very quick responses. We're just seeing a lot more issues getting created. So that's what we like to see. We just want to kind of keep an eye on other problems that pop up with the app. So let us know in Slack as things come up. From checking it yesterday, there were 11 new applications that hadn't gotten comments yet. And in the last 14 days, we have closed and granted 30 DataCap applications. So total 164. It's looking great. Taking out the auto verifier as an outlier, we're seeing about 7 clients per notary. So that direct activity is looking wonderful. At this point, we have a number of open large data set applications. Some of them, as you can see, are pretty close to getting their 7 notaries. We would encourage you to go check those out and see. Some of these are resubmissions where something happened with their GitHub account. So some notaries have already signed on to those. I'm going to be working with them to see if we can recover some more of the comment thread to get posted back in there for the various audit. But that's just so that you're aware. I think there was one other resubmitted that had already been approved. So that's where we're sitting. With that, I think we've got, I think I saw some members from Claywatch on the call. So is that correct?
Yep, ClayWatch is here.
Awesome. Great. Did you guys want to present? Do you want me to pass over screen controls, or did you want to just chat directly?
Yeah, sure. We'll do the screen share.
Okay. And is that Daniel?
Yep, it's Daniel. ClayWatch Daniel here.
Awesome. Let me just make you a co-host for a second, and then you'll be able to screen share.
Mm-hmm. Right. So for ClayWatch, disclaimer here, I have joined this call as a translator for the ClayWatch. It's a team of Korean developers, blockchain developers, and they were not fluent with English and they were not comfortable with presenting the project in English. So I've worked as a community staff, translated for several meetups before, been in the local community. So I just got in here to help, just putting it out there. So we have two other team members with us at the call. Jace, he's our main developer, and Kim is helping us out. And ClayWatch, just briefly speaking, let me share the screen, pull up the screen here. Yeah, it's excuse me, it's currently the language is only supported in Korean. But basically speaking, this is a DeFi dashboard for Clayton, which is one of the biggest mainnet projects here in Korea. It was developed by Kakao. It's a mega enterprise here, and there are the activity is growing within Korea and within Asia right now. And currently, there's one DeFi project which is ClaySwap within the Clayton ecosystem, and ClayWatch. We developed a DeFi dashboard where the people can see how many what they provided liquidity, their LP tokens, how much they have staked, and how much they have in their wallet. So this is like a dashboard of their portfolio and their liquidity pools. And also here you can see the transaction history of your swaps, of your liquidity of your LPs, and how much you have withdrawn and how much you have been rewarded. And also the ClayWatch is providing a feature called swap premiums, which provides real world data feeds and gives you how much premium you have within the ClaySwap ecosystem and the exchange. It provides you the price difference between arbitrage opportunities. And also there's a swap alert where you can set an alarm if there's more than $5 million worth of swaps happening within ClaySwap right here, you will be able to monitor these big whale alerts, like a whale alert. So ClaySwap, how we are going to utilize Filecoin is that there are a lot of transaction data which will be indexing, and also there will be snapshots of images of people's accounts and their current deposits, current history, info, reward, swap, and withdraw information. And that will be currently we are doing it in our own servers, and we want to put it on an IPFS in a decentralized storage like Filecoin. So we have submitted our applications for a large data set. And also, yeah, the other samples and the data samples have been on the application. You can check it out on the Google Drive. Currently, there are about 10 10,000 to 20,000 Clayton active wallet users, and about 5,000 of them, which is about 25 to 50%, have interacted with the ClaySwap, the contract, ClaySwap service. And so currently, how much data they're providing based on the 5,000 active users is they're providing about 50 gigabytes worth of data per day and about 400 gigabytes per week. So that's the amount of data we are projecting. And as the user traffic grows in the ClaySwap ecosystem, and as there are more DeFi services and NFT services that are coming in the ecosystem, we expect the number to grow. So this will be a huge. We'll be using a huge storage, obviously. So I guess that will be the introduction of ClayWatch. And yeah, I guess if you have any questions, please let us know.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, from the notaries on the call, I think in checking the GitHub issue right now, I think there's one notary from Filecoin Foundation, Danny, has jumped in, wondering if there are any other notaries that are on the call that had any questions for that team while we've got them. We can also post them in the chat or post them directly in the issue. This is issue 29. So there's the link. And it looks like Deep has a hand. Go for it.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for presenting on behalf of the team. I'm not a notary, but I do have a question that I think might be interesting to hear the answer to, if possible. Like, I was curious about like the data, like residency and the storage provider selection for this data. Like, is it going to be served by providers in specific regions in the world? Are there any requirements in terms of like access to the data set, like the number of replicas that will be stored? And then based on that, like is ClayWatch intending to do the actual selection of the storage providers? So is it like picking specific storage providers with which like contracts are being signed? Because it seems like it's a pretty big project and there's a lot of like companies that have been looped in. And so I'm curious how they're intending to ensure long-term quality storage, basically.
I see. So let me relay this question to the team. And before, let me check if I got the question right. Geographical dispersion and how many replicas and copies of the datasets will be necessary, required. And the last question was how we would be selecting the service providers, and have if any contacted them before. So. Actually, so based on the application here and the answer from the team is that first they will be focusing mainly on the Asia region, especially in Korea, and next will be China. And as Clayton is bootstrapped to a more global community, this would be more broadened and broadly dispersed around the globe. But for the first phase, this will be mostly focused on the Asia region. And for the replicas, they are projecting to save at least 3 or 4 copies of the data. And in terms of the service providers, they have meetings. We have met with several service providers before, but have not confirmed on any of them yet. right?
Awesome. Yeah, there's a hand. Go ahead.
I have a question. I noticed that ClearWatch will work with 4 or 5 miners, but our large dataset normally we will allocate less than 5% to per miner. So I want to ask that if there are some plans to work with more miners.
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically, Daniel, to check and make sure I'm understanding things, especially like typically we try and see from the percent allocation of the data that we get, no more than 5% for these large data sets to a particular storage provider. And so doing 4 or 5 individual storage providers, 4 or 5 miners, is a pretty low number compared to what we like to see for these large data set applications. So I think what some of the notaries want to know is that just an estimation to start because that's how many maybe you've heard from, or do you think that you want to remain at a really low number? Because that may change how we decide.
Yep. Right. So yes, of course, this was our first estimate, and of course, there obviously they will have to expand more, and we'll be trying to reach out. The first estimate was because that was the only number that they could reach to. I guess once they participate in the community more and more, they obviously have more plans to meet with the service providers and contact them and expand the numbers.
Awesome. Did you have a follow-up question there? Or does that get to your question?
I think there was a chat here that how big is the data that will be produced every day? Yeah, I guess that was answered it's in the issue, and to point it out, there was about 40 gigabytes. Just a second. There was about 40 gigabytes of data that are being produced every day, and in weekly we estimate about 400 gigabytes. Yes, I hope that answers the question.
Eric, I think you got a question.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi,
so
Eric.
I'm asking for the data. So how to transfer the data from Korea to China? I mean, using the internet, or you just mail the hard disk to the miner?
Yes, the team, the blockchain developers, will have plans to develop a system that will be able to transfer the data through online. That will be automatically on a regular basis.
Okay.
And yes, that's the online transfer will be the primary method, and offline will be a backup plan. Offline transfer will be a backup plan.
Okay, clear. Thank you.
Cool. Are there any other questions? Yeah, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for the other clients as well and stuff. So maybe it's worth just asking the present notaries to see if anyone's interested in supporting this application, and I can take some notes and put it in a comment in the issue. Any of the notaries here want to support this and call it out today, or want to take a look and see if there are additional questions? I think Galen shared the link already to the issue, but I can do that here again. All right. We'll definitely be following up. Thank you so much to the ClearWatch team for coming to present. I really appreciate your time.
All right, thank you for the time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Awesome. So we heard from ClearWatch. It's issue 29. We can go jump in or ask some more questions for follow-up questions in that. And like I said, there's a couple others, both Shanghai and this Protocol Labs deal bot are being very close with 6 notaries. And I think we may hear from USC Showa joining the call in a little bit. But another quick update. Root key holders, we've mentioned this a few times, and this question has come up with a couple of pending large data sets. Our goal is to add 4 new root key holders to specifically speed up this process of getting the notaries created. And we are still processing those. Those messages are pending, and we're working with the existing root key holders to get that approved. We're still hoping to get this accomplished as soon as possible. This is a priority, and we have multiple people pushing on it. So we are aware that it's slowing down some of those clients that have already been approved. Some quick updates on bots. I'm going to do these really fast because I want to make sure we have time for the LDN discussion. We have 3 bots that are being developed, 2 of which are already in testing. The 2 that are in testing are being developed by the Kiko team. These are to support the large dataset notary process update, issue 217. But even if we change that proposal, we could still utilize some of the features of these bots. So specifically, there's a onboarding bot to try and improve automation for all of the client DataCap onboarding. It's analyzing applications for completeness. This is happening predominantly with the large data sets, and it can then propose a new multi-sig notary in the governance repo for the root key holders if we move forward with the issue where we automatically know which signers we'd put on it. And then once that notary is completed, we could propose the first DataCap allocation automatically, and we could notify the client of that allocated DataCap. So some of these steps, like I said, could happen independent of the process proposal. But for example, this one, we would need to know that we had that list of the multi-sig. So some samples of what the comments would look like in GitHub to let the client know that it's been completed. There's also a stats bot that I think a number of people have been talking about wanting to help increase some of our audit tools. So very excited about this one specifically. It can monitor a client's remaining amount of DataCap, and when a particular threshold gets reached, it can update an issue, which could change the labels to start a subsequent allocation request. So what we're trying to have happen here is the ability to automate the subsequent requests. This has been a question that's been brought up a number of times of a delay waiting for your second or third or fourth request. So if we could get to a certain threshold, we could then kick that off. To help with the audit, we could link to the stats dashboard and post a table of the previous deal behavior. This is a sample, like I said, from that bot being tested. So we'd be able to see what the subsequent allocation would be and their previous behavior. So you could get that snapshot like we were talking about of what percentage. And we are also, the foundation is submitting a micro grant for development of a Slack GitHub bot that basically can post a reminder update, and we can have multiple different work streams that this would utilize. But one example would be to look in the client onboarding repo and count the number of open issues that are labeled bot looking good and state verifying. So right now on that previous slide, we saw there were 59 of those. And so a thing that we could do would be every Wednesday in these various channels, we could post a message that says there's 59 open issues for client applications. We could also be able to watch, how many closed and granted applications are there to keep track of that, or we could use it for reminders about large data set applications. So the goal here is to find something and build something that can tally a count of various issues and post it for reminders and more community kind of action. So with that, I want to pass it over to Deep to talk through kind of where we are with issue 217 and what the community is thinking.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Galen. So looks like 217 got a good amount of attention. Thank you so much for those of you that have been contributing to the conversation and just generally providing active feedback and suggestions. So yeah, like lots of general changes were proposed, but just to give you an overview, if you haven't already read through the issue that was proposed a couple of weeks ago, in general, the goal of Filecoin Plus, right, is to reduce the friction of onboarding clients to the Filecoin network and ensuring that the productivity of the network grows and that clients have sort of the ability to ensure that they're able to get from Filecoin the quality storage that they're looking for. We've been running this. So for those of you that have been around, especially from the first round of notary elections, this was proposed several months ago, having some sort of mechanism whereby extremely large amounts of DataCap would be made available for specific clients was an idea that was floating around in Q1, Q2, and morphed into this experiment, which is the LDN mechanism, which we as a community had sort of agreed to test out and earmark for up to 50 petabytes across 10 plus clients. And what we're seeing so far is that the time to receiving DataCap for clients that apply through this mechanism is still extremely long, several weeks to go through the process of getting to 7 notaries, then the root key holders actually turning around and granting the approval of a multi-sig as a notary for that client, and then subsequent allocations requiring a signature threshold of 4. And so we're doing a little bit of thinking and collecting feedback from clients and what this experience felt like for them and ways in which we could improve it, reduce the friction, but also continue serving the actual purpose behind what it's there for. And so the details are definitely in the issue, but just to make you aware of the salient points. The first is that we were thinking of removing 7 notaries self-electing onto the multi-sig and proposing that active notaries or non-opted out notaries basically end up being on the multi-sig to begin with. And in that way, it functions a little bit more similarly to how each individual notary works, where once you get notary status, you're a notary. Until you have DataCap to grant, you are expected to do the due diligence of clients that are coming to apply to you, respond to those applications, identify who is worthy of receiving the DataCap, and granting DataCap to that client. And so similarly, the multi-sig could consist of a larger set or a complete set of active notaries, whereby we wouldn't have to wait, a client wouldn't need to wait for specifically a set to elect themselves only to then have them sign again. But we could just start out with those notaries being on the multi-sig, which would then result in once the application actually comes in and is validated, the multi-sig is already prepared and sent to the root key holders. And then during that time, we could still carry out the due diligence as notaries do, or involved community members have been for many of the existing applications for clients. And then first and subsequent allocations would be at a decreased threshold. So instead of having 4 signers on each allocation, we were initially proposing having 2. And doing as much of the client work as possible in an automated fashion. So Galen talked about how some of those bots could be extended basically based on the outcome of this conversation to support actions on behalf of the client, checking how much data cap is left on a particular address and requesting for additional data cap. That is something that could take a client a few hours or even days to notice that they're running low, but is something easily automatable, reduces the friction, reduces the turnaround time. And so generally speaking, we wanted to sort of propose a bunch of these changes. And so I think Galen actually wrote up all of this in detail in issue 217. And so maybe we can head to the next slide. We've got a bunch of good feedback on this. Oh, I should have probably had this one up while I was talking. Sorry about that. So just to run through, actually, I'm going to leave this up for 20 seconds and make sure people, if you have any questions on the process, let me know. Cool, yeah. So as I mentioned, like the main changes are basically that if we do as much in an automated fashion as possible, set up the multi-sig almost immediately. It's still fine for the client application not to go through. I would imagine still quite likely that not every client will get DataCap because notaries decide that they don't want to actually sign for this the same way they would behave in case the client had applied directly to them. And so with the additional automation that we have that can help with auditing, with data gathering, like this, in at least in my opinion, ends up being a much more efficient format for us to start moving closer towards enabling clients, even if it's initially for smaller amounts of data cap, to get started and test out the network, and for us as a community to start to become more like watch persons of the network, where notaries take this role where they get data and feedback to actually make decisions based on, as opposed to constantly having to do a bunch of like KYC work upfront. And so it represents like an interesting direction where, as a program, we can shift much more towards operating like a set of principles that enable certain types of clients over time to be very productive on the network. But yeah, I would say definitely take a look at the issue. All of this is detailed there. If you have any immediate questions, feel free to raise your hand and let me know. If not, I did want to do a little bit of a deep dive into the discussion that was happening and the responses to this proposal. So there were three like different sort of changes that I think people had really good feedback and suggestions for. So I wanted to talk through each of those. The first is in the allocation calculation. So for those of you that are aware, the current LDN format operates based on this like client submitted weekly onboarding rate, where the first allocation is like the lesser of half of that weekly onboarding rate, or like 5% of the total applied for DataCap, I guess. The second allocation is the weekly onboarding rate, or the equivalent of 10%, and then the subsequent allocations from there are 20% of the total allocated DataCap, or whatever the client claims they'll use in every 2 weeks. And so there's some really good analysis that was done by notaries and community members on basically like how that could end up taking extended periods of time. And then there's also like FIPS in the work, such as snap deals, that may impact like the ability of interaction between notaries and clients to ensure clients don't get blocked waiting for DataCap to be able to make deals. And so there's definitely a lot of like great ideas on how we could scale this or change the way it works. Some of the notable proposals were, just increasing that rate, for example, like substantively, like just like instead of it doubling or just 10xing it for every subsequent allocation, for example. There's another one which is really interesting around like having like this target data cap amount. I think that was suggested by Eric, but I might be misremembering. But this idea that basically you can look at the client's like past data cap allocation usage over a period of time and make assumptions on how much they're likely to use in the coming weeks, and use that basically to have like a shifting like target amount that can drop or go up over time depending on how productive a client is. So instead of us having to ask a client upfront, we actually would just learn from their patterns and practices on the network. The original proposal didn't actually have anything on this like changing, because we were specifically trying to address the problems of like speeding up the existing process as opposed to changing like the rate of dispensing of DataCap. But I think these are like pretty compelling proposals, and I'd love to open the floor to anybody that wanted to share more on their ideas or have feedback on that specific topic. And then we'll talk through the threshold and I think some of you did address many of these in your comments, so maybe I'll talk through the other two as well, and then let's open the floor for some discussion. So the second topic is on the threshold. So this threshold being the actual number of signatures that's required from signers on the multi-sig to actually result in DataCap being granted. So the current threshold is 4 signatures out of 7 notaries across 3 regions, and the proposed threshold was actually having that number drop down to 2. And things that we were considering or called out as flags in the proposal included finding ways to ensure that like maybe notaries don't sign multiple consequent allocations, or we restrict it so that like each of the signatures can come from like a specific region, but they have to be from 2 unique regions or something. And so there was some pretty good discussion. I think a lot of people felt that 2 might be a little risky. Others felt that 2 might help speed things up quite a bit. So, I think we'd love to hear if there's any strong opinions to share on basically like what people think about that number, and ways in which that we can make it safer or learn from it as a community. Of course, barring that this is continued iteration on experimentation, and we're all working together to sort of make this a more effective solution in the long term. So, experimenting and having like version trials is a completely reasonable sort of next step as well. And then the third thing on notary rotation. So this is the aspect that basically like instead of having like the entire set of notaries be responsible, we could have a subset of notaries be responsible over time, either through a self-elected like setup similarly to what we have today, or via like automation effectively, where you can ensure that like notaries themselves aren't always the ones just signing all the allocations for each client. Like what we have seen today is like very active notaries on large data set clients end up being the ones that sign and re-sign subsequent allocations as well. And so we didn't have a specific provision for this in the initial proposal, but if people think that this could be an interesting mechanism to mitigate risk, then it would be good to hear opinions on that as well. Okay, talked for several minutes. Hopefully you got most of that. But yeah, I think the main thing I'd like to do is just open the floor up to see if there's anybody who's attending that has any ideas on these 3 fronts or in general on the proposal. Would love to get feedback. So if you've already shared feedback in the comments, you can feel free to also share that here. Or if you haven't yet, then this would be the perfect place for you to share your thoughts. But yeah, actually, before I continue, I'm just going to stop here and see if anyone has any thoughts. You can feel free to unmute or share your thoughts in chat. Or I guess raise your hand.
Yeah, hi, Deep.
Hey.
Yeah, I still like insist the answer like I asked like 2 weeks ago when you were on vacation. So about the threshold, about the two notaries, can we like have the like a region restriction on the notaries? So we have to like have one for the from the region that from the same region from with the applicants, and also like get one from other region to like to monitor it.
Yeah, I think that one is a very reasonable sort of change. I think the main thing that we'd also then have to do is ensure that like everybody uses the same like a method of sending a message. So right now what we're seeing is like some notaries are comfortable just sending messages directly to the chain. And then there's most notaries are using the Filecoin Plus registry app. And there's some interop issues between those in terms of like, I think there were some issues last week where you might be aware with like transaction IDs not being hashed or encoded and decoded correctly, resulting in multiple signatures coming in, but the actual proposal not being approved. And so I think if we could centralize on one process, so if we were to say, yeah, let's like take a dependency on one tooling right now, which is like the Filecoin Plus app, then what we can do is add like flags for like based on when you were elected as a notary, you were picked for a particular region. And based on that, we could add like a flag that says like, yeah, like approved from one from region that the client is applying for and one from a different region. Is that what you were proposing, or were you just thinking that each of the signatures should be from a unique one, regardless of the region where the client applied from?
The previous one.
Okay, so like one from the client so one from the region in which the client claims to be applying from, and then one from anywhere else.
Yes, or if the applicants that need to like transfer their data to like multiple regions, and it like should be have like maybe more than two. Like so like like if you want to like save data at different regions, it will have like different like regulation right there. So it might need some like expertise right from there, like maybe notaries from their regions to evaluate if that is that like a possible way to like store their data, or yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think that leads to some challenges around like how much we can then automate or standardize the process, because it would be needed to be tailored to the particular application. But I think that's a really like interesting flag in terms of stuff we should probably think about, like with like medium and longer term implications, where the point of having a region specific notary is also to ensure that we have region specific expertise, right, on like regulation, on policy, on ways in which like clients can actually flourish and be productive on the network. And so leveraging them for that purpose is also like a very compelling point. Thanks for sharing that. That's really interesting. Galen, you have a hand?
Yeah, I was wondering, like thinking about that point, do we think that every allocation would need a notary from the region of the client? Or do we think that that's most important for the first allocation? Or maybe it's, it's important for the first and second, but then from the third on. And I don't necessarily know from a technical standpoint what is possible about that, like what we could put in as a flag. But I just wonder if we require, for example, if the application comes in from Europe, if we require a notary from Europe for every allocation, that may get, we may then have like a reliance on a subset of people again, which could slow us down. I also wonder if like another way to think about that would be, because some other people have mentioned this idea of like, what if the notaries are responsible for stopping the allocations? So like one way to think of it is, if two notaries could sign the allocations, but then another notary from the region was responsible or could somehow look at it and say like, actually I'm the expert on this type of data or this region, and I have a question or a concern here. So I think there could be some interesting ways to like look at and solve that, but I wonder if you think that every allocation should have a representative from the region.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to think about, like when you need that like response. What I'm wondering is, would that be like we've talked about like denying like DataCap before, where it's like I don't think this client should get DataCap, or I don't want to give like DataCap to this client. And I think that the bar for that is like relatively high. Like I think I see from like a empirical standpoint, from my experience in working with notaries over the last several months, it feels to me like instead of saying no, most notaries instead choose not to react as much. And so I'm curious if like notaries here have any thoughts on like, stepping into a GitHub issue and saying, hey, like I don't think that this is going to work, or I don't think this like will actually like pan out based on like the current like client expectations. I'd love to hear some feedback on that as well. And then Julian, I see your video popped up, so if you have any thoughts on that or separately, please feel free. Cool. I don't want to take up too much time on this, because I know that there's also some, yeah, Jonathan Doughton just joined the call. I know he wanted to share stuff about his Showa application request. And so I think maybe what's worth calling out is basically that, like, today is we're testing out the dual time zone calls. So we'll have a similar discussion in the second call. In case you're awake or want to participate in that and want to think between now and then and come share your thoughts, then feel free. If not, what we're planning to do is basically consolidate the feedback from the calls plus what's been shared in the issues, and then update the proposal accordingly, and hopefully sort of get some additional comments and additional feedback this week so that we can figure out like what the right next steps are, and proceed with enabling the existing client pool, but also future clients that are excited to use Filecoin. So yeah, thanks so much for engaging on this so quickly and so productively. It's awesome to see all the notaries and different community members that have been active and contributing in the conversation. Looking forward to continuing it on GitHub. Thanks, Galen.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Deep. As he said, we'll be consolidating feedback and updating that proposal. So please go check out that issue, leave your comments and thoughts there. And turning it over to Jonathan, I'm going to stop sharing and I think he can take the screen.
Hi there, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, it's great to be here. And I guess in the interest of time, I'll just speak very briefly, and then if there's questions, I can turn on some slides to clarify. So I'm here from the Starling Lab, which is a joint initiative between the USC Showa Foundation and Stanford's Department of Electrical Engineering. And I'm here to talk about our DataCap application. For those of you who may have seen it, thank you, Galen, for throwing it in the chat window. We're in the final stages of getting notaries behind this application, and I thought I would just use this opportunity to briefly introduce myself and the project and make a very quick case for our application. The DataCap that we're looking for is to store the world's most comprehensive and largest collection of video testimony of the survivors of genocide. It includes 10 different collections, which begin with the Armenian genocide at the beginning of the 20th century, all the way up to contemporary conflicts in Myanmar and Syria and Iraq. On average, we have testimony which looks at around 3 hours in length. And in total, there's about 240,000 files, basically videos that cover 55,000 individual testimonies from these survivors. So it is a large data set, but indeed is also a vulnerable data set. And so about 2.5 years ago, we began a process of working with Filecoin, even before it had launched, to start figuring out how to lead a way for our organization to actually put the entire collection onto the Filecoin network. So thus far, we've been able to do tests where we've done pieces of the collection, and we've worked with Deep and others who are on this call to help strengthen our processes. And we're now very confident that we have a way of getting this done efficiently. And there are 2 benefits, I think, for the community that I should just mention in closing. The first is that we have been working at each step to help perfect tools that could make large-scale data movement onto the File network possible. So in supporting our application, you're also supporting the path that others will also follow to put their large data sets on. So that means direct engagement with miners, storage providers, I should say, and also folks who develop tools. So there's kind of a 2-for-1. We get preservation as well as perfecting a process. And then secondly, this is one of the things that really command this project is the fact that it is an intuitive and clear example of why distributed systems matter. So when you think about vulnerable data sets, it stands to reason, like this data set, it stands to reason that you'd want to distribute them as far and as wide as possible. More copies, keep things safe. And so here now with Filecoin, we have the ability to do exactly that. and to distribute the DataCap among multiple storage providers that can help us secure this testimony. And we will take the deals for as long as we possibly can. So we know they're limited now in length, but we absolutely intend to renew them and have exciting plans to keep renewing them for many years to come. With that, I'll turn things over in case anyone has questions, or Galen, I'll let you continue on. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, the application link is there. If there are some questions from notaries on this call, would love to see some hands, or you can type it in the chat as well. Wait a second to see if anyone's got a question.
Galen, do we know what the current notary count is for this application?
I believe it is currently at 3. Okay. Let me go triple check that. Yes. 3.
3 for Starling?
Yeah.
I am part of this. They already signed on Starling? I think so. I just don't remember.
I just look at the GitHub issue. It looks like it's Danny, Charles, and Fenbushi. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
No, that's okay. You can count on me.
Okay.
I give my support from day one to Jonathan.
Awesome. Thank you, Shilling.
Are there any other notaries here that have any questions, or community members that have questions for Jonathan Doden on this project, or would like to support the application?
Oh, I see a question from Eric. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jonathan. So do you accept the notary from China to storage your data?
I think that for this initial application, there are definitely some data sets which are from Nanjing. And so if you feel that those are safe to store, we'd be very happy to provide that information. Whereas the international information, I think it's just for, I think, to be cautious and to make sure that this is the right thing for storage providers in China. We'd probably not store that information there, but if we had the support of the DataCap, we could use that to support other storage providers in the ecosystem. But yeah, the Nanjing files, I think, are an important part of Chinese history and absolutely should not be forgotten. So I think we could definitely explore putting them over there.
Okay, clearly understand. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great. Well, again, thanks to all for your time. We're really pleased to be working with Filecoin and this Filecoin Plus solution. We hope we have many more things that we'll be able to do together. So hopefully I'll be here in no time at all, telling you about the success of this project and bringing more fun and exciting things to work on together. Thanks to all.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Deep, it looks like you're adding in those 2 other notaries, XN Matrix and Sonic 42. So with that, I don't know that we have other clients to present today. So we cover those client presentations. Wanted to take a second and just see the 4 minutes remaining if there were other sort of open forum questions or concerns or outstanding needs. And it looks like also Deep, Eric is jumping on to USC show.
I just and also so the DealBots project and the reputation system project in general is at 6 signing notaries, and so that's one of the things that I spend my time on as well. So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to talk through our plan, our ideas, thoughts, and like why I think it's a really important lever for Filecoin deal making.
Yeah, and yeah, this is Charles, and I saw the email, so I'm joining. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I make a short, I make a few slides to better demonstrate what the first one NFT IPFS storage project going to do. So if you're interested, I can make a presentation for that.
Yeah, go for it. Do you want to take the screen?
Yeah. Just a minute. Yeah, so yeah, I think you can see my screen now. Okay, good. So basically, like, yeah, we're doing the first one NFT IPFS storage project, which is designed for sending. So for now, we see that there are increasing demand from different blockchains like Neo and Alexia and other blockchains. So, but beyond that, we also have other industry users like VR and VR, AR, and AI. They all want those storage to be saved on the Filecoin network. So we are working on this. We build a team with smart contract developer, dev manager, and the problem manager, so dedicated to the work. And we also get, I saw that there were currently 4 background projects we are working on to support. So we have the blockchain solution from US, who is doing the AI for Filecoin machine learning. Another dev grant is for the NFT storage and Sharma IPFS to Filecoin. The company has 2 branches in both China and Canada. They want to using the IPFS to reduce their cost transfer from AliCloud and Battle Cloud to IPFS. So another dev grant, which is working by Fian, is the music NFT portal. So he has finished all his part of the music storage, but he wanted to using the NFT platform to convert all his existing dataset to become NFT. So another one is another from VR industry, which is converting the Unity 3D model to NFT projects, which is, for now, we see there are lots of cyberpunk, which is 2D images. So he strongly believes that the next trend will be 3D images or 3D features. So he wants those parts can be mint as NFT and saved on Filecoin. So we are working on support those projects. This is one sample, like a machine learning data set we have been working before last year. This is several different space of monkeys. Monkeys are very hot in cyberpunk now. So like, yeah, those monkeys, they can be labeling as different species. And the data without labeling has no value actually. So with the machine learning, researchers need those to be converting and saved on Filecoin. So we build everything, and we are currently close to the launch. Yeah, so this is the plan we are going to be doing the geolocation distribution. So we are MineX and MineX2 members. So with past experience, we have successfully stored the data set on those geolocations. So we are adding more geolocations. If people are interested, they can contact us and we can add them. So for now, we have 5 miners in North America, and EU will be 2 storage providers, and Asian will be like 1 or 2, depending on where they're located and their bandwidth. We also have some new 2 modules from first one we'll be using for support the storage and payment. So the storage will be like, you can use any IPFS as the gateway to fetch and upload, but we also build our own IPFS first one gateway. So now you can using North America Canada node to doing the transfer and distribute the data from first one node, IPFS node. We have the frameworks of offline DR sending components have been running for months, and we recently added a new component called the payment gateway. So with payment gateway, currently we will be able to support different currencies, USDT and even BSC chain and other chains. So those part has been recently almost finished development. It's going to be launched in 1 or 2 weeks. So basically, like if people want, they'll be able to make a payment through other blockchains for Filecoin storage. And this is a big project. and we want to test it and launch at the same time. This is business structure. With first one, we support both two components. One is the Filecoin S3 integration module and IPFS module. For this project, we don't use an IPFS3 module because it's more for industry usage. We're using the IPFS. So after you place order, make a transfer to IPFS, you'll be able to send it to the first one DR processor, which will make a auto market or manual market. You can place bid and get subscriptions. And on the other side, we are doing a swarm batch mixer, which means that it's the NFT or other project too small, we'll compose them, then send them batch together to a virtual pool, storage provider pool and the bidding provider pool. So there are two different pools. The storage provider pool is more like some existing high reputation storage provider will be directly sending to them, as we shown that it's a geolocation distributed data map. And the bidding pool, bid provider is like some people is really interesting to get that as a newcomers, they can add into the pool using bid function. And then now we have the technology testing bunch. We have been successfully sending out 20,000 deals in last few months with Slingshot. We help VN set up the 3,000 Rise Geom distribution. We're going to send out those data set in September with him together based on IPFS technology. And we were awarded the petabyte data set transfer grant in March, which is designed for this purpose, send out large data set. Yeah, so this is basically like the background technology and distribution plan for first one NFT IPFS storage project. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. We got some claps from Eric.
Okay.
So just a quick look at Charles's application. So it looks like we have 3 notaries supporting it right now: Sonic, Danny O'Brien, and Irene Young from the 12 Shields Foundation. If there are any other notaries that have questions or want to support this, let me know. I will happily document and update the issue.
I think I see a thumbs up in the chat. Is that a thumbs up in support of the Phil Swan?
Or maybe they just thought Charles's presentation was so good. And we're also running a few minutes over now. So you can see, Gillian, is there anything else we wanted to flag? Are there any like burning questions for Charles? If not, maybe what we do is I think you already dropped the link so people can take a look at the issues.
Yeah, I think the only other thing to say is we're going to have this same call again in about 8 hours. I don't know who can make it to that, but it'll be the same agenda. And then both of these will be posted on YouTube to watch again, and to check out the various open large data set issues and the open issue 217 in the Notary Governance channel. And anything, any burning questions we didn't get to in general, feel free to please post those in our Slack channels. We can drive some conversation there as well. So I don't have anything else for me this morning. We ran a little bit over. Thank you all for being here, making time, and a great community governance conversation. Deep, anything else on your side?
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to round 2 of the Notary Governance meeting for August the 31st. So we'll be recording this and combining it with the call that was the same agenda that happened about 8 hours prior to this, and we'll post both of those up on YouTube together, so you can find everything there for posterity. We're going to jump in some more people may be joining us as we roll through, including we may have a couple clients that make it ideally later on in this hour, and we can hear from them about some of their large data set applications. So similar agenda as we normally have, running through some kind of current metrics, and then talking about the proposal to the LDM process, and then some time for some open discussion. So 2 weeks ago, our snapshot on our interplanetary dashboard was looking good. That has been increasing every 2 weeks. If you open it right now, you may see something shocking with the average time to DataCap sitting around 17 or 18 minutes. While this is a great aspirational goal, it is, in fact, to our knowledge, a bit of a miscalculation. So sorry to burst everyone's bubble. There is currently an issue with the GitHub scraper, and it is miscalculating some of these metrics. We hope to have it corrected and updated by the end of the week. So just if you sign on and see that, while it is exciting, it may be currently inaccurate. Just wanted to call that out to everybody. We looked at a allocation funnel like this 2 weeks ago to kind of start to see how much DataCap is out with the notaries versus how much has then been applied down to clients and sealed in deals. This is taking into account both large data sets and direct notary activities. So we're working on having some easy ways to split out those metrics, because as you can imagine, the DataCap that gets assigned to an LDN in like the 5 petabyte range will significantly alter all of our calculations for how that compares to the rest of the direct notaries. So we're working on increasing our audit streams so we can look at those things separately, but taken in conjunction, we are seeing about half a petabyte of DataCap sealed in deals down at the bottom of this funnel. Speaking of direct notary activity, we have about 59 open issues when I checked and updated these slides yesterday. And that includes 11 new apps that are waiting for kind of first action. And we've had 30 in the last 14 days that have been closed and granted. So pretty good speed, total of 164 closed issues that have been granted. There was an error that people called out in Slack where notaries were not seeing their direct allocation requests, and that had to do with the number of open issues. We sort of hit a threshold, and then there was a pagination issue. We worked with Kiko, we got that updated. So I appreciate everyone's patience as we resolved that. At this time, notaries should be seeing all of their requests through the app, and please continue to let us know as errors like that pop up. So from this calculation, if we exclude our glyph auto verifier, which is currently has 428 clients, bit of an outlier. The average clients per notary is about 7, which is an increase from 2 weeks ago, so fantastic. We do have a number of open applications for large amounts of DataCap. Some of those are at 6 notaries. I believe on this list as well, USC Show Foundation is also now at 6. We heard from them this morning. We also heard from Claywatch and Phil Swan, and Deep talked a little bit about the DealBot project. We'll give him some time at the end to talk about that again. But please go check out these open issues and ask some questions of these clients and put your name in to help be a notary for that process. One other update, we are still working on getting the root key holders changed. Our goal is to add 4 new root key holders to expedite, especially to expedite notary creations. It has been pointed out as a slowdown. I know that there's a couple of large data sets that have met the threshold of 7 and are waiting to be approved by root key holders. so that they can start allocating. We are still processing those addresses and making those updates to the F080 address. So that's still in the works. There have been some slight unexpected technical difficulties that we're working through to get that completed. So right, one other thing before we turn it over to Deep, wanted to give you guys some information about some other changes that we are making to some more bots. So we have 2 bots that are in testing, and then one that is still not yet in testing, but is in development. So these first 2 bots, the onboarding and the stats, we're building those with the Kiko team. Mostly we kicked off the development of these in connection to these changes to the large data set process, because we knew that we could still utilize a lot of this tech investment, even if the specific proposal doesn't get passed in its exact current state. So we wanted to go ahead and show some of these bots and some of the features that we'd be able to use when we roll them out in production. The onboarding bot is designed around improving some of the automation. It is specifically around the large data set notaries, but it can also work for some of the other kind of direct client actions. It can analyze an application for completeness and kind of look through and flag any missing sections. This is something we're doing a little bit of already, but we're going a little bit further in that. And then also based on the new LDN process, this bot can propose a new multi-sig automatically to open an issue for the root key holders. That's kind of contingent on us saying we know the list of notaries we want to put on that multi-sig. Once that multi-sig notary is completed, this bot could propose the first DataCap allocation automatically. So as it is right now, there's kind of a double manual step that needs to happen. We could automate that, and we can notify the client more directly of the allocated DataCap. And so a sample kind of comment there that we're working on. So once that DataCap allocation goes through, we'll just have some more transparency and automation for that. The other bot is around stats. The goal here is to monitor the remaining amount of DataCap that a client address has. And when that client reaches a certain threshold, the bot would update their application issue to change the labels and automatically start a subsequent allocation request, and then post a table with an audit of their previous deals and a link to the stats dashboard. So the goal here is to try and make the audit step for notaries a little more automated. So this is a sample of what that comment could look like. The client address, if it is connected to a large data set for multi-sig, and the amount that they would subsequently be requesting, and then a snapshot of their previous behavior. So in this sample where we're using incomplete data, you can see these deals don't look great, but in an ideal world, the number of deals and the percent allocated to the top provider would kind of help a notary say, this person is operating in the way that they said in their application, and I'm happy to give them more DataCap at this time. Deep has a hand, so I'm gonna throw it over to him.
Just wanted to flag that this is something we'd love to get some input on as well. We're expecting that you are among the primary set of consumers for this kind of statistics and this kind of tracking. And theoretically, its main purpose is to actually make your lives easier, right? Reducing the friction for you to have confidence in the clients to which DataCap is being allocated to. And so what we're sharing here is the first version of what we came up with is what could be useful, but would love to hear thoughts and opinions from you on how we can improve this, what is more relevant, what are the kinds of questions you want to see answered that in one snapshot view or snapshot pane, you have confidence in the statistics that are being shown to you about how a client is using their DataCap and whether or not they're doing the so-called right thing on the network. And so if you have questions that come to mind that you'd be oh, it'd be great to see an answer to this, or great to see a particular kind of statistic or metric, then great place to talk about it now. But also if you continue to think about it, then maybe we can continue the conversation in Slack or on GitHub accordingly once we have some of these things to demo and share.
That looks good, Dave.
Awesome. Yeah. The third bot that is currently still in development is coming from a micro grant from the foundation. And we're basically working with a developer to make and deploy a Slack GitHub bot that essentially could tally open issues from certain repos with specific labels and then post in Slack channels. So a lot of the current Slack GitHub integrations work on waiting for some kind of push notification, some action in GitHub to then push a single message to a Slack channel. And instead, we're kind of trying to find a way to have some better cadence of reminders, but also then driving community engagement to show this is how active our community is across these different repos. So a sample behavior for this bot would be to look at that client onboarding repo and count the open issues labeled, bot looking good and state verifying, and post a comment in the Filecoin community Slack channel, Phil Plus and Phil Plus notaries. The thought there is, once a week, this bot would say there are 59 open issues, go read about them here, and kind of help remind the notaries of those open behaviors and link them directly to them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deep to talk more about issue 217.
And you're also giving me privilege over controlling your screen, Gillen. Thanks, folks. So some of you have probably already seen this. I think in this call, probably a majority of you actually have. Issue 217 was drafted up as a proposal on ways in which we could speed up the overall large data set notary flow that exists today. And so in general, just stepping back a little bit, right? Like the goal of Filecoin Plus is to increase the productivity on the network. And what that looks like in today's version of Filecoin is reducing the friction to onboard clients to the network, because we are in a state where we're all working at surveying organic demand as it shows up in the network, as well as finding ways to reduce the friction for clients that do turn up at the network and are excited to use it and leverage it for whatever services can be provided to them in the form of storage. And specifically, the purpose of the LDN process, as it was originally proposed several months ago, was effectively that there are clients with very legitimate use cases that require DataCap at a scale that's much larger than what an individual notary would be expected to administer effectively. So that includes not just having that much DataCap allocated to them, but also in addition to that, doing the due diligence, doing the appropriate legwork, working with the clients, ensuring that they feel supported. Having that burden on an individual notary for something that's a petabyte scale allocation, especially when Filecoin Plus as a program is just as young as it is today, and with so much to learn, seemed a little unrealistic as we were looking at different ways in which we could do this. And so we had this version 1 of the LDN, multi-sig allocation mechanism that was developed between April and May of this year. And it was intended as an experiment, right? We gated it for 50 petabytes to see what it would look like. We're about halfway there, probably a lot more once we get all the signatures from the root key holders, but we're at least past the halfway point of that initial 50 petabyte allocation. And what we're seeing is that the time to DataCap for those clients is in the weeks range. And that's almost unacceptable from the perspective of an actual service, right? If you think about a client that has a legitimate business need, showing up to Filecoin as an alternate option of cloud storage or just storage as a service, and then being told, hey, not only do you need to fill out all this KYC stuff, but now you need to wait 4 weeks or whatever while we do due diligence and get the community buy-in. While that it is reasonable to have that barrier of the community buy-in and the KYC, the amount of time that it's taking is not, and not all of that is on specific individuals, but on the process that we designed, because we were approaching it from the angle of a little bit more caution to ensure that it wasn't easily abusable, and then also looking at ways in which it would make sense to engage notaries. And what we were also, I think one of the other things that has changed a lot in the last few months is the total number of active notaries has also gone up like fairly substantively. Right? We also happen to run another round of notary elections over that same duration, and we're seeing different patterns, practices, and data emerging on like behavior as we get more and more notaries, many of whom are much more active over the last several weeks. So the point of the issue 217 proposal is basically to decrease time to DataCap as it stands for like these large client or large use cases and projects that require DataCap at a much higher scale than like what we're typically serving as an individual notary, but taking some inspiration from the individual notary interaction flow a little bit more than we were before to streamline things and reduce the friction, both for notaries, but also for clients, and specifically, I guess, targeting for clients. So if you haven't already seen the issue, what that actually looks like in terms of how the process changes is that once the client like submits a large data set notary application in the repo, instead of like waiting for that 7 notary barrier of like due diligence plus the same set of 7 having to sign again, a bot could effectively do validation on the answers and ensure that like enough information is there, or ensuring that the application itself is not missing or incomplete in any way. And this, of course, can get more sophisticated over time, but could also fire off immediately the creation of a multi-sig with all notary addresses or all notaries that are opted in or the set that haven't opted out, like depending on how we want to frame this. But as many notaries as possible could be on this multi-sig for this particular client. And the threshold of that would be set to 2 as opposed to what it is today, which is 4. And the proposal and the sort of driving mechanism behind the 2 is basically that we ensure that there's a proposal and an approval message. We ensure that there's some amount of sort of watching happening where it's just not like one individual notary, because then it's no different from like an individual notary process. But it's also more about like evolving the role of the notary a little bit to be more curious about like how clients interact on the network, more focused on like data-driven decision making like over a period of time, as opposed to necessarily like being too much of a gatekeeping role like right at the start of adoption of the network, for example. And so reducing the burden of the notary up front and getting them more data over time and letting them react and make decisions as a group or as an individual, but with more better inputs to that decision-making process, basically. And then also reducing the time to DataCap for the client to get like an initial allocation. If there's like active notaries that are willing to take a bet on this client, as they would have had that client applied directly to them. And so the multi-sig sort of gets created like out of band as long as like the actual application is validated. And while we are sending over to the root key holders, waiting for them to approve the notary status, at that stage, there's still due diligence happening either from notaries that are excited to support this particular application or members of the community that are interested or want to ask questions or even participate in the market making that might be happening as a result of this particular interaction or this project that might be onboarding data under Filecoin. And then effectively what would happen is, now that you have like this, you have a lower threshold, each subsequent allocation as well is lower friction, but the expectation would be that we focus a little bit more on like collecting the right data, improving our auditing practices, improving like the kind of inputs that we're getting to make decisions as like notaries effectively, and arming you with tooling and with whatever is required for you to feel confident about like a client actually doing the right thing on the network, and indexing more on that as opposed to like upfront, like whether or not like an application looks good or whether or not like a client is making the time to come to a governance call and talk through everything. And so clients get moving faster, and then notaries get more data quicker and more data over time and better decision making practices at the risk of like initial allocations being perhaps looser as opposed to where we are today, where applications get stuck for a long period of time. So there's more details, of course, written up in the issue. If you have any specific questions on like the process changes being proposed, please let me know now. I'll give you guys 20 seconds while I take a sip of my coffee.
Okay. These tools are great, I think, in proposal, and they're definitely going to be helpful. I think it still comes down to a human at the end of it. So how might we organize? I think I asked this in the last call. How might we do that better? And it's interesting because I'm thinking through this as a DAO, like how can it be more efficient? What is the motivators for the root key holders and the notaries? And we all have day jobs. So how do we find the time? How do we stay motivated? And what's the incentive? I don't have answers to those questions, but they're probably going to be part of getting more engagement.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point. I think that like each stakeholder role, like, and there's several in this pipeline, right? There's the root key holders, like you called out, the notaries, the clients themselves who have decided to apply for this thing and are willing to wait for it. There's the storage providers who might be shepherding clients, doing BD on their own behalf because they're offering services on the network. There are clients who, and so there a bunch of different stakeholders, and each of them, I think, other than maybe the actual storage providers and the clients, like are not necessarily doing this as like a full-time job. Even in those cases, they might not be. But this is like a interesting infrastructure decision that is being taken by a client, and then like maybe like the business of a particular storage provider. But the decision making is happening primarily on the notary front, and so I think what it comes down to is a combination of ensuring that notaries are still empowered to make impactful decisions and ensure that they have like a valued and valuable role in the ecosystem, but also reducing that burden as much as possible so as not to interfere with other responsibilities or create unnecessary friction for conducting those tasks through tooling, automation, etc. Galen, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this this question of like, in what ways do we see this like shifting from a standpoint of like, how do we continue to organize as we scale, and how do we continue to like think about levers and like motivation for all the different stakeholders? I think what is really exciting to me with like, this proposal and some of the other like ideas that we've heard is the things that we can learn from these proposals to then like move faster and like iterate both on how we make proposals like this, like what is our process for making these changes to move towards those other models, and then also how do we as a community allow for different things to happen at the same time. Like similarly, right now notaries have a lot of autonomy to be able to say like, I'm going to choose to use this kind of application process, or like lean more on like this question or this type of client, and another notary could choose to go in a different direction. And I think being able to let both of those things happen and see, well, what's working for you over here, or what are your hurdles? So I think with proposals like this, our hope is that we bias towards like trying things that feel low enough risk to like learn from them, and then find ways of like, what did we learn about the process itself, and how do we like keep pushing the network forward? So that's my take on what direction is this going from a like organization, decentralized group. I think Danny also has a hand.
While Danny's finding his hand, all the responsibility is often on you guys, and this might sound anti-DAO, but is there any way you can distribute? Could this be a meritocracy? Could there be some levels of notaries? Like I actually have allocated time to this because I see it in my interest to make this work for what we're trying to do down here, right? So I'm happy to put my hand up and say, I'm going to spend an hour every day or whatever it might be. And then I can herd the kittens around a cohort of notaries to bring them together, because these tools are wonderful, and they're really going to help with alerting and the statistics, and even the calculation around what's the right allocation and so on. But I think at the end of the day, it's still going to come back to humans that need to do something. So mate, that's an idea, and perhaps we could just test it. But yeah, we have to do something, and we have to help you with it. I think it's not just up to you guys.
Makes sense. I think that was part of like having like a lead notary as well, like the shepherd, like a set of notaries for like the multi-sig to begin with. And I definitely think like, part of this, like we were, as a program, like Filecoin Plus is like fairly young, and as a network, Filecoin itself is also fairly young. Like it's not even a year, right? That like we've been up in mainnet and experimenting, and already we have like such an insane size like marketplace. That I think we have a lot, like we have a pretty nice opportunity, a pretty unique opportunity right now to test stuff that will probably have impact at like outsized scale compared to like where we are today, right? We're like operating in like small percentages of what the network is like capable of having. And so like using, like thinking of this as like time where we can like play around with these constructs, I think is really good. And so if you have ideas around how you might want to structure like in notary like set interactions, I think Meg, it's definitely worth like proposing and like talking about and seeing how we could go about doing it. But in general, like moving towards more DAO like behavior is probably the direction I think like most of us think this program is going to go to. And so I kind of view this proposal as a step in that direction, right? Which is like more reactive, more like looking at actual data and on-chain behavior as opposed to speculation, and more decentralized like decision making and distributed decision making, and like testing things at scale that go beyond like what the power of like one individual entity has, but instead like operating more as a group, operating more as a pool of notaries. And so, yeah, I think it makes sense.
Sure.
Cool. I did want to highlight a couple of points. Oh, there's another hand. Danny, is your mic back?
It is back, or at least I hope it is. Can you hear me?
Yes, it is. We can hear you.
Okay. So this is actually an aside, so I'll keep it really short. That one of the things that strikes me that causes sort of is one of the delaying factors, and I think these proposals will improve that, is that we're sort of compelled by the tooling to do this in a somewhat batched way, or at least I do. Like, you know, I have a day job as well, and so I tend to just do these in a compact set. And so I think we should think about, just as a footnote, to try and make the tooling a bit more asynchronous, so that, you know, we are either on the main Slack channel or individually sort of notified, because I'm not sure the GitHub notifications are doing that. But this is a completely aside. Let's continue without comment. I just wanted to say it before I forgot.
Awesome, thank you. I did want to highlight like a couple of the discussion points that have been raised in the issue for a few minutes, and then I know we have a couple of clients in the call, so I'd love to turn it over to them. So just briefly, the first sort of discussion point that came up a fair bit was around like the calculation of allocation limits that exist today. And so like the initial like LDN mechanism had this like sort of like tiered, like first allocation maximum, second allocation maximum, and then third and beyond, like subsequent allocation maximums for the client. And there was some interesting proposals brought forth on how we might want to consider restructuring that, like whether we increase the slope basically of that function substantively, or change it to basically be based on like target onboarding rates that we adjust based on behavior of the client on the network, as opposed to you know, what they wrote in an application at the start of their project. So there were some interesting ideas there that would be awesome to get some more opinions on as we continue to refine and change and experiment with this process. Second was around threshold, where there was like some back and forth on like, is 2 too little? Is 4 too many? Like, how do we actually want to adjust this? And so I know Galen added in some responses on why like initially we thought 2 might be a good idea. And so would urge you again to like take a look at the issue and see if you have any thoughts. But basically the idea that we can start to you know, shift a little bit more in the direction of like being more like watch persons of the network, and push the notary role to be more like the enduring longer term responsibility of ensuring clients are successful on the network, as opposed to the short-term responsibility of ensuring that like clients are initially trustworthy on the network, and sort of using that as a motivation to adjust the structure of the interaction between a client and a notary over time. there were also points raised around whether or not we want to ensure like notaries themselves who are able to sign things like lose or gain the ability based on like other notaries that may be interacting. So there were proposals around wanting to have geographic distribution of notary signing, or urge like notaries, like ensuring that, for example, one of the notaries has to be from like the region that the client is applying from, which are interesting proposals around, where the expertise or individual expertise of a notary could be leveraged to ensure that like the client is being served accurately on the network. And that's also to the count. The flip side of that though is like if we are working towards like a DAO like structure where we are operating more on like actual data on with regards to like on-chain interaction, that should apply to notaries as well, right? Like we have the benefit of a blockchain is it's a log where we can also see every single signature from every single notary and see all the outcomes of that, like DataCap allocation and the deals that were made from it and where it ended up. And so worrying a little bit less about like the sort of the initial potential for extreme use cases and ensuring that we're more focused on enabling the clients that are being blocked and that we all collectively believe are worthy of the DataCap is probably like a way to reframe this discussion a little bit. But anyway, what I do want to wrap up because I've taken up plenty of time on this topic. But yeah, next steps to this, I think, are consolidating any feedback that you've shared here, that other participants in the call in the morning shared, and then making any adjustments to the proposal and sharing those in the issue. Would love to see continued engagement there, because I think ideally, like we can arrive on some sort of next steps or like some sort of consensus, at least around like what we think might be like the next iteration of this, or the V1.1 or V1.5 effectively of the LDN process. Fully, going in eyes wide open that we're likely to continue changing things, adjusting things based on feedback from you, from clients, and continuing to propose ways in which we can make this a more effective mechanism to ensure clients have minimized friction in adopting this awesome storage technology. Cool. With that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Galen. I think Jonathan Doughton's on the call to talk about Show's application, and we have a few other people as well.
Yes, that is accurate. So I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second, and we're going to hear from some client applications. So first up, Jonathan Doughton, I'd love to hand the mic over to you.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, great. Well, lots of friendly faces here, so hello to all. And I'm here to just raise some awareness about the DataCap application that we've put forward. And I think we're getting close to getting enough notaries to join us, but we thought, yes, Deepa signaling 6. We'd love to have just a final push to get over the hump here, because we've got lots of work to do to start sealing. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jonathan Doughton. I'm the founding director of the Starling Lab, which is based at USC, at the Shoah Foundation there, which is they are the stewards of the largest collection of the survivors of genocide's testimony. 55,000 testimonies of the survivors of genocide. They're in an archive that's 4 petabytes in size. And our DataCap allocation that we're asking for is for 5 petabytes for us to basically take that entire library and actually put it up entirely on Filecoin. I'm also a fellow at Stanford's Center for Blockchain Research, and it's in both of those capacities that I formed the Starling Lab with the generous support of PL and the Filecoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web. And we are using advanced cryptography and distributed systems to help advance human rights. With this project here, for us, it would be a tremendous accomplishment to get this done. We've been a big supporter of the Filecoin protocol since its beginnings. We've been at this for 3 years and figuring out how best to onboard the data to Filecoin. And I think with this project, the easiest way to summarize the benefits are that there are 2 things that you get for essentially 1 DataCap allocation. The first is that we are smoothing the path for other big data providers to actually get onto the network. So that means we're examining all the tooling, the best practices. We're working with the storage providers directly to figure out how to make sure that we can start sealing at scale. And that includes also pioneering some of the first offline deals that are at scale to then be able to distribute widely across the Filecoin ecosystem. no less. We're big supporters of different types of auction and distribution methods. I see Andrew Hill here, and we're big fans of textile, have been for years, and their latest work in the auctioning space is something that we would be using this DataCap as well to help advance their work as well. So one is that you're getting technology development for the whole ecosystem. And then secondly, of course, we're getting the preservation of this data. So we're really excited to be working with the community on this. I'm happy to pose questions to anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about the program. But I guess the big message to you all is that we're really close. And so for those of you who have been on, some of you have already supported, but those of you who are on the fence, happy to answer any questions to try to strengthen the application and potentially even work closely with you all on this project.
Any questions for Jonathan while we have some time? I see a hand from Danny.
Yeah, so thank you very much for going into the detail about this. So you said that the database as a whole is 4 petabytes and you're asking for 5. And I was wondering if you had any plans. So one of the things that we try to do is to make sure that multiple miners, the load is shared between multiple miners. Are you planning to distribute the 4? Are you thinking about having duplicate copies, or are you going to sort of distribute the 4 petabytes in total over a number of miners?
It's the latter option. The reason we asked for a little bit more than 4 petabytes is because we have some experiments that we've been running and smoothing the path for the big lift. So yeah, I think the answer in terms of the distribution pattern is that we have several miners from the MinerX program, or I should say storage providers from the original MinerX program, and they step forward to help us with some of the tooling and some of the processes. And then from there, we have a plan of rapidly scaling to go beyond others. But as you're pointing out, Danny, it's one copy that we're spreading across multiple storage providers as opposed to duplicate copies. At least to start. Great.
Thanks.
Yeah, I suspect the 5 PIV thing would increase if we had let it be a higher number in how we designed the LDN thing. So I think that's, Danny, you're muted, but I see that you're just acknowledging.
Yeah, I realized. So my question was, well, maybe this should be larger, but look, that's actually our limit. So
yeah, well, that could be something that we should address in any additional changes that we do as well, right? Where like part of that was more, again, it was part of a it was like a scale test. It was like intended to help limit the downside of an experiment gone wrong in many ways. And so if we're building confidence in our processes and are adjusting things, then we should also adapt and maybe change those limits over time. Just something to think about.
Yeah, some of the things that we're thinking about, Danny, that are on the horizon, and we'll pilot it with at least some of the DataCap that we've got, is looking at larger file sizes. So specifically, we have like giant photogrammetry files that are massive, and we also have this really cool program called Dimensions and Testimony, which is an AI-driven engine that takes survivors of genocide into that engine, and you can actually ask them questions in an interactive format. It's pretty cool. It's 60 Minutes did a whole piece on this. It's quite extraordinary. And those file sizes are giant. And so the idea is to actually break them apart and then spread them over several sectors. None of that we're actually working on right now because we're looking at JPEG 2000 masters that are in the several gigabytes in size for each. But those larger virtual reality and testimonies are certainly really exciting. So I think we'll have DataCap to be able to test out how that might work. But the main goal for this one is to make good on the promise that we've had for quite some time, which is to get the entire Shoah Foundation's archive, which I should just briefly mention, if you don't know, For those of you here, it covers 10 different genocide collections from the Armenian genocide at the beginning of the 20th century all the way to contemporary conflicts of systemic violence, including Myanmar and Eastern Syria. Great.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for your time. And it looks like now with those 2 additional notaries, we've hit threshold. So Deep and I will work on going through and kicking off that process. So excited to hear, and we appreciate your time. Thank you. And I think you are also in the GitHub issue. So if there are any questions or anything that come up, you can see those.
Awesome.
Want to see, were there other clients
I
here?
think Neo had a hand actually.
Pitch?
Oh,
sorry.
Oh, you didn't have a hand? Okay, sorry.
Oh, it was thumb up.
Thanks again to everybody.
Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Gillen. You were just gonna open the floor to other clients.
Good. Yes. If there are other clients want to raise a hand.
I have an open application with 6 notaries waiting for a 7th that I'm happy to talk about, which is deal bots. So in general, like one of the things that is going to become very compelling and very important part of the general like deal making mechanism and flywheel for Filecoin is reputation. Since this is anonymized peer-to-peer transactions happening, data that is collected on chain about the behavior of people on the other side of a contract becomes extremely valuable. And so specifically as we look to enable like clients on the network on a journey who are finding ways to identify reliable storage providers on the network, ensuring that data is available to those clients about like how storage providers behave in the short term, or at least from what we've seen so far, becomes like a really compelling data point and a very important data point in enabling their decision making to identify where they'll store the data, how they'll store that data. Of course, there's a bunch of clients going via abstraction like services that make these decisions for them. For example, like what Andrew and his team are building would effectively enable those decisions to be made on behalf of a client, but still several clients are still coming directly to the network and end up leaning on resources like filrep.io, the Filecoin reputation service that exists today, as well as other similar data that exists from on-chain, not necessarily scanners, but like dashboards and analyzation tools to make those decisions. And so the DataCap application that I have open right now is for having deal bots run that effectively simulate client behavior on the network by making deals over extended periods of time with as many miners as possible, collect that data and make that available via a sidechain store for any reputation service to be built on or to incorporate in the methodology or the calculation that a reputation service may be using to identify whether or not a service provider is likely to actually be reliable over a period of time. And the reason this is important is because just doing like a query ask is like very difficult. Like for those of you that are storage providers, you know that what a client sees when they just want to see whether or not they can make a deal with you is very different than when they actually try to make a deal. And that's because there's like a lot of complexity in the system. There's a lot of like challenging aspects to interacting with a client address and a miner address, and so because of that complexity, actually making the deal is the best way to know if a deal would actually go through. And so that's the purpose behind this one. Any questions? Anything I can help? It looks like Neo is multitasking and already signed on, so I guess we're at 7. But if there's anything that I can help address, please let me know. If not,
actually, I think we may be at 6 because I think I may have counted Meg twice.
Yes. Okay. The classic.
So I'm
classic
looking. I'm looking. I know. I'm looking back through, and so I think that we have starting at the bottom. I think we've got Neo, Meg, Danny, and then another Meg, and then OZHT, Byte, Base, and Braz, and then now Andrew Hill as well. So Andrew puts us at 7. Thank you. You don't need to get to it until the morning because the message is next going to get kicked over to the root key holders.
You don't have to do anything. Yeah.
Yes, you don't need to do anything right now, Andrew. But appreciate it. So we've got, and Andrew commented, so getting them across the board.
Yeah, favorite kind of DOS, the one that's done by somebody else. Accurate. Awesome. I know Faye's waiting on root key holder sign. No, actually, Faye should have DataCap allocation at this point. I don't know,
I think
Laura.
that is correct.
Right, Laura or Joe, if there's anything you were here to share in particular as well. If you are waiting on allocations or have DataCap applications you might be filing in the future, please feel free to share. If not, I think, Galen, is there anything else we wanted to flag or talk about? It might be worth pulling up that table to see where we are with the current LDN apps as a gentle reminder for the notaries that are here to see if there's anything that catches their attention. So we're at, so there'll be 10 open apps basically once the DealBot and the Showa foundations are closed. There's still a few more very close, right? There's the Shanghai Hsinchu Information Technology Company, and there's several of them at 3 and 4 as well. I know Charles was here this morning to talk about the Phil Swan project. So for those of you that didn't make it to that one, I would recommend checking out the recording as soon as we get it up in the next day or two to see if that would be interesting. But yeah, feel free to take a look at some of these other ones as well.
Yeah, and then otherwise, if there were just other sort of open, outstanding questions, now's a chance.
Or new ideas, new topics of discussion.
So I'm not even putting my hand up anymore. So I'm pretty sure that all of us or some of us like keeping track of the notary signatures in these GitHub issues for the large data. And I was wondering, for those of you like Galen, who were sort of doing it more assiduously, is there a way that we could like share your tally so we're not duplicating effort when I look at these things and sort of mentally calculate? Yeah.
So one of the things that I've been looking at, GitHub has the ability to create projects and project boards, and then you can kind of group things and do a little bit more of like project tracking as to like what things are open, what things are pending. And that, yeah, similar to like a Trello board. I have been kind of investigating what it would look like to do that with labels, but it would mean introducing a lot more labels to basically have a label that says, one notary, right? And then you'd have to go through and add another label that says, notary count 2. So it's still like a lot of manual lift, but that may help. One of the reasons we've been sort of, I have been waiting to do that is one, seeing what happens with this process proposal to see if the threshold stays at 7, because it'd be a lot of lift if we're going to change that. And then similarly, 2, we're investigating moving some of our dependencies off of GitHub in the kind of next year Q1, Q2 timeframe. And so similarly, does it make the most sense to retool the way that we're tracking these? But yes, to your point, like as it is right now, using an issue and using just a human comment makes it challenging to stay on top of sort of what the count is. I have a spreadsheet. I think a number of different notaries do the same thing. I'd love to hear if somebody has great GitHub tricks or experience. I'd be happy to hear other ideas.
Yeah, I think the shortcut for now is probably just maybe a public spreadsheet that anybody can edit or shared with like the set of notaries that are interested. You don't like the idea of anybody edit. But like anyone can go update the notary count. It's not going to actually influence on-chain stuff until it's verified.
I've been burned so many times by people working in spreadsheets, and these are close friends working in the same spreadsheet. I don't allow people into my spreadsheets easily. it's too easy to go off the rails.
Well, I mean, it's
Version
Trello,
control.
right? Like if we could use something like Trello, and it probably wouldn't be as, I mean, if the lead was delegated the responsibility to manage to herd the kittens, then they're taking that issue and they're moving them through. So maybe it's like 8 categories across the top, which is 1 sign-on, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're just moving them across. The lead does that, not you guys. And then when we get into root key holder, like they're in that column and we can see them easier. But yeah, I wonder if that would work or not.
I don't know if there's like
I think-
easy mechanism. Sorry, go on, Gil.
Yeah, I think Meg, like to your point, like that's it's a program management, like project management type of thing, and it's not, there are tools for it, and it's not impossible. And it is an amount of work that, like, you know, anyone in the group could take on. Another thing the foundation is kind of working on increasing our staff and hiring some additional people, also around community managers for a variety of governance and FIPS and Filecoin related, Filecoin Plus related things. So that's another set of like roles and responsibilities. I think that in the short term, we're hoping to sort of get some of these process changes made, and then learn from those to see where do we need the most leverage of program management, and is it around specifically once the notary is created, getting the allocations passed, because maybe that's like a higher leverage set of tools and kind of work where like a lead notary could really be shepherding subsequent allocations and audits, rather than the lead notary or a, you know, to your point of like a cat herder, focusing on the front end of the funnel, which is new applications come in and getting notary traction around them. Like those may be, and it may be that that's just 2 separate people. As we get close to our time here, really appreciate this conversation. Great points all around. Fantastic. Thank you guys for joining. This recording will go up along with the one from this morning. Please go check out issue 217. See if there are some additional comments or questions that you have there. There's a lot more details and a lot of good discussion happening. So thank you all.
Awesome.